Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
The last thing you wanted to do was for your favorite artist to come out with an album and you couldn't get it or you didn't get it and everybody else had it. Like, imagine The Chronic coming out and all of your friends have it, but you don't have it. And you didn't have it because it came out on Tuesday and on Friday you got paid and you go to Sam Goody to go pick it up and Sam Goody sold out. And then you go to Ray's Records and Ray's Records is sold out. And then you go to Best Buy and Best Buy is sold out. And you're sitting there and everybody else has this album and everybody's loving it. They're quoting songs, they're jamming to it, and you're left out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I want to thank you all for tuning in as you do each and every week. Shout out to those of you who are watching on YouTube as well as Spotify. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to talk about is how listening to music just isn't the same anymore. If you've been following the podcast, you know, probably about a month and a half ago, I did an episode talking about how watching TV isn't the same. And after listening to that particular episode, it got me to thinking, like, you know, not only is TV not the same, but listening to music isn't the same either. And what I realize is that there are some factors that play into how and why I listen to music and how it's consumed and the differences between the past and the present. Now, obviously, technology has changed a lot, and we'll touch on it a little bit in this episode, but there are some other fundamental things that have happened that make me think that things just aren't the same. And, you know, things have changed in some ways for the worse. Shout out to the homie Eclectic. Before Everything Changed is his podcast. If you haven't listened, go listen to his episodes. It'll really take you back as to how things used to be. And I'm going to touch on that in some way on this particular episode because this is kind of a look back. One of the things that I think has affected how we listen to music is how the music was created. You know, without the technology that they had once before, you know, you go into a studio, you cut a record, and, you know, a couple of months later, a year later, it comes out. It's different now. And I know that there are some factors that contribute to the music sounding and looking and feeling the way that it does. But how music was created is a big game changer. Back in the day, you would go to the studio, obviously, and you would basically live in the studio. I'm always fascinated when I hear, you know, some of my favorite musicians talk about how a certain album was created. Because here's the thing. If it was the 80s, the 90s, or the 70s, you know, I wasn't around, and if I was around, there was no way for me to tap into find out how a certain album was made. Like, I could ask a few people, but nobody knew how and why, you know, Straight Outta Compton was made, or, you know, any other hip hop or R&B album. Nobody knew how Al B. Sure made the In Effect Mode album. Nobody. And so if these artists, you know, speak to podcasters or interviews and they talk about what they did and what led to their creation of that particular album, you know, at least for me, I am tapped in. I really want to know what it took to make that album. But as I mentioned, they go in the studio and they work in the studio constantly until the album was done. And, back then you didn't really have a whole bunch of distractions as far as in the studio. From what I could gather based on the information that I've heard for a lot of artists, the people that were in the studio were there to make the music. Like, you didn't have a bunch of hanger-ons and people like that, a bunch of groupies and a bunch of dudes, and dudes can be groupies as well. People just non-essential people hanging around the studio, in and out of the studio, that type of thing. One thing I know that was very evident in hip hop in particular, back in the days when the music was created, you worked within your camp. Like, you didn't work outside of your camp. I mean, yeah, you had factions like the Native Tongue crew. But outside of Native Tongues, I mean, you didn't really have a lot of collaboration of different artists. It wasn't until we got to maybe about midway through the 90s where you started seeing a lot of artists from different parts of the country working together on music. And again, that would still be in the studio. Some of that happened after the quote unquote East Coast, West Coast beef, which, indirectly or directly led to the deaths of Tupac Shakur and the Notorious B.I.G., aka Christopher Wallace. But you didn't really work with people outside of your camp. And, your crew people could get on your records, but, you didn't have a lot of outside influence from outside of your crew. And that's why, this particular generation, they're used to hearing albums and songs with guest features. I remember years ago, the homie J. Cole made an album and he didn't have any guest features. And people were really like dumping on the fact that he didn't have any guest features. But, there was a point in time in hip hop and rap where you didn't have any guest features because outside of your camp, you didn't want anybody else on your record. And you didn't want anybody else on your record because, you didn't really want to be shown up on your own record. You didn't want to get bodied or murdered, as Nas said, on your own track. And, hip hop and rap at that particular time, and we're talking the 80s and, for the better part of the 90s, was very territorial. So, it got to a point where like rappers from the South would stick together and they might get on each other's track, but you really weren't going to see a Outkast working with a Wu-Tang. That wasn't going to happen. Sometimes you weren't going to see a Tribe working with a Wu-Tang or anything like that because people just ran in different circles. But how the music was created was, internally, and, there wasn't a lot of influence from the outside, if you will. Another thing that I think contributes as to how, listening to music is different now is what was used as far as the creation. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not a musically technical person. I know a lot of the instruments that are used, but I don't know the difference between one from the other. So when I would hear these stories, particularly on music podcasts like the QLS Questlove Supreme podcast, or any other musical podcast, and I hear people talking about MP3s, MP60s, the SP12s. Those are musical instruments, drum machines, those type of things that were used to create certain sounds. Samplers, ASR 10s. Shout out to my boy Jay Fresh, who had an ASR 10 when we were in high school. And, being able to sample certain sounds and manipulate music. Shout out to the late, great Jay Dilla, the king of beats. The MP3 was his thing. And there's a case to be made that he was one that mastered the MP3 and he never read the manual as to how to make it function. But he was able to create all of these sounds with that particular instrument. So getting word about how and what was being used is always fascinating to me because, again, I'm not someone who's technical. I don't know I know the difference between an MP3 and an SP12. I don't know what a Linn drum looks like without looking it up. But all of these things are instruments that are used to help create a sound. I think that definitely changed over a period of time, and it made listening to music different because obviously the sound changed. If you listen to South Bronx from Boogie Down Productions, that was what, 87? Yeah, hip hop doesn't sound like that anymore. You know, that sounds totally different from if you listen to a beat from Pharrell or a beat from Timbaland in 2026 at the time of this recording. And it's supposed to sound different because technology's changed things. But I'm also interested to know about those instruments and what it took for those engineers and those producers to make the sounds that we hear. But listening to the music ain't the same. Another thing that made a huge difference as to why listening to music just isn't the same was how the music got to us. My first early thoughts on hip hop, or let me call it rap, because that's exactly what it was. It was rap music. My early memories and thoughts of rap music really came from what I heard on the street. And what I mean by street, I don't mean like on Flatbush Avenue, because I'm someone from a very small town in South Carolina. I'm from Florence, South Carolina. It's not a big place. It's not Brooklyn. It's not Compton. It's not, Houston, Texas. It's not Atlanta, Georgia. It's a very small place, but I was able to get my hands on music at a very young age, and a lot of it came on the streets. And what I mean by streets is I remember distinctly we had a neighbor that lived 2 houses down from us who he had an older brother that lived in New York City, and he would travel back and forth between Florence and New York City. And when he would go visit his brother in New York City, he would always come back with these cassette tapes. And these tapes had different types of rap from different artists, that some that I'd never heard of, some of them, very popular, like Curtis Blow and Run DMC. And I remember getting a tape from my neighbor, and he made me a tape, and I just remember just playing it and playing it and playing it. And it was just interesting how that music got to me. As we move further down the line, as far as time is concerned, the music, how it got to us was very particular. Rap music in particular, not so much as R&B, but rap music in particular came to us via the stores. So you had your, stores or music stores, I should say, your record stores, to be even more specific. I remember in my hometown, there's a place called Ray's Records. That's where we would do our shopping at. We would go to Ray's and we pick up tapes. And I remember buying cassette tapes for as little as $2. And this was 85, 86. But yeah, it was Ray's was kind of like a mom and pop place. It wasn't a chain place like Sam Goody or Manifest or anything like that. Shout out to Manifest. I spent a lot of money in Manifest. Shout out to the homie Danny Foxworth who used to hit Manifest as well. Fellow podcaster. Shout out. Salute. Yeah, we would go to, record stores and things like that. And then as it got bigger, there were places like Tower Records, as I mentioned, Sam Goody, places like that. Best Buy. I used to buy a ton of music from Best Buy. And slowly but surely, as it reached the level of the bigger stores, the chain stores, if you will, as far as how the music would get to us, the mom and pop places kind of got phased out a little bit. And I saw places like Ray's Records in my hometown, go out of business, because why go to Ray's when you can go to Best Buy? And Best Buy's got, every single CD or tape or cassette or album that you wanted. And Ray's had different type of selections. And, it was kind of like big bank take little bank. But that's how the music got to us. It got to us from the streets. It got to us in the mom and pop stores. It got to us in record stores, and then it got to us in bigger chain stores. Another thing was not only once it got to us, but how did we consume the music? That was another thing that made me realize how listening to music has changed. How do we consume music? I can remember I was born in 72, right? I can remember probably as early as the age of 6, where the car that we had as a family, uh, inside the front part of the car, the console was a little hole, and it was there for a 8-track. You could actually play music on an 8-track. And I don't remember the music that we had on 8-track. I probably should ask my parents, but I do remember us having access to an 8-track. And then from 8-track, it went to vinyl records, which, as I mentioned on several episodes of the Rap Soul podcast, be sure to check that out. Shameless plug. New episodes every Thursday as well. On the Rap Soul podcast, I mentioned how I grew up in a music household where my parents played music constantly, constant flow of music any and every day around the house. And one of the subtle but not so subtle differences between my house that I grew up in, the house where I raised my kids, is that I grew up in a house where the music got played, and my kids grew up in a house where the music got played in their ears. In my house growing up, the music got played everywhere in the house. You could have music in the bathroom. You could have music in the living room. In this house, it gets played in your ears. And that was just a sign of technology. But yeah, I mean, we had 8-tracks, we had tapes, and then I eventually moved on to CDs. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention radio, because radio played a big part in the R&B that we consume. Shout out to the Quiet Storm. It also played a big part in the hip hop that we listened to. But hip hop was slower on the trajectory than R&B was, because there was a long period of time where your favorite hip hop song couldn't get airplay on radio in your hometown or any major city. And if it did, it was the late night mix, like maybe on a Saturday night. And then they eventually moved to, okay, well, we'll probably play it during the day. But even then, they were very selective, because I'll share the secret that everybody knows. Rap, as it was constructed, wasn't supposed to be around long. It was expected to be just a fad. It was something that they thought was going to be here today, gone tomorrow. It was going to be like breakdancing or it was going to be like disco. You get a couple of years and then it's all gone. And then, groups like Run DMC happen. Then people like LL Cool J happen. And then you have this huge explosion in the mid 80s, and rap is everywhere. And more importantly, it left the streets and it reached the suburbs. And once it got to the suburbs and there was a demand and a push for the music, all bets were off. But yeah, we heard a lot of music on the radio. Like I said, R&B and rap. And then obviously, TV. We got Soul Train. We had, MTV. With MTV, you had Yo MTV Raps. And then, of course, you can't forget BET, Rap City, Video Soul. I did an episode on Video Soul, Video Vibrations, the whole BET lineup, 106 in Park, on down the line. So how we consume music also has changed how we listen to music. And then eventually, like I said, it went from the point where we were listening to music in our houses, in our cars, to where the music was confined to a phone. And then the music was confined to, where are my things? Oh, it's right here, AirPods. So all of that stuff happened. And to be honest, it seemed like it happened in a very short span of time, but it really didn't. But all of that changed how we listen to music. So it's really not the same. Fast forward to right now. I say this often, and I really mean it. Like, because there's such an abundance of music out, there's really no need or no rush for me to hear said song, said album, because it's always there. I mean, I pay monthly for a Spotify account, and I have a Spotify premium or whatever like that. And so I no longer have the stack of CDs They're in my garage. But, I don't, sometimes in not having those CDs, things have changed because, you could walk past your CD tower and you see, oh man, I ain't heard Me Against the World in a long time from Tupac. Let me grab that CD, and you'll play it and listen to it. Or you might walk past your CD tower and you see, oh man, I ain't heard Mary J. Blige's What's the 411 in a long time. Let me listen to that CD. I miss those days because I don't have those moments anymore. And so now I have to be very intentional about, listening to something. And what's interesting is I listen to music every day. That's a given, right? But particularly when new music comes out, I'm never in a rush to listen to it. Never. I mean, your favorite artist can drop an album on Friday and it'll come out and everybody will be talking about it and it's buzzing. And then it'll come back to me and someone will say, hey, Kyle, have you heard the new album from such and such? MC Wingtip has a new album out. Are you going to check it out? Have you heard it yet? No, I hadn't heard it yet. Oh man, it's great. It is a banger. Okay, I'll get to it. And there's enough of I'll get to it to where if the album came out on Friday, I mean, I'll be honest, I may not get to it until the weekend. Maybe, maybe I'll get to it by the next Friday. I'm not in a rush because there's such an abundance of music that I don't have to. And one of the things that made music dope when we were coming up and it's changed how we listen to music is that there was a certain level of scarcity with the music. I talk all the time about how when an album came out from someone who was great, you just didn't know. You had no idea as to what was going to happen as far as like how you were to get that music. And the scarcity was such to where when the album came out, you had to get it the first day that it came out. Like if you didn't get it the first day that it came out or the second day, you might not get it at all. And that's wild because like it was such scarcity there to where, if you didn't get the music when it came out, you might just be short. And the last thing you wanted to do was for your favorite artist to come out with an album and you couldn't get it or you didn't get it and everybody else had it. Like imagine The Chronic coming out and all of your friends have it, but you don't have it. And you didn't have it because it came out on Tuesday and on Friday you got paid and you go to Sam Goody to go pick it up and Sam Goody sold out. And then you go to Ray's Records and Ray's Records is sold out. And then you go to Best Buy and Best Buy is sold out. And you're sitting there and everybody else has this album and everybody's loving it. They're quoting songs, they're jamming to it and you're left out. Nobody wants to be left out when it comes to music. So that changed as far as how we consume music. And so the days of scarcity no longer exist because guess what? All I have to do is press a button on this phone and I'm going to hear music. I've paid for it. So I'm going to hear music. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, what happens if Spotify folds up shop tomorrow? Well, I'm going to be in a little bit of trouble because now I still have CDs, but I don't really have a whole bunch of places where I can listen to CDs. In fact, outside of my car, there's no other place for me to listen to a CD. I don't have any, there's not a CD player in this computer. There's not a CD player in this room. There's no way for me to play these CDs. I used to keep my six disc CD changer loaded back in the day. Man, I haven't had a 66 disc CD changer since I got rid of that Nissan Sentra sitting on 13s. But so I said all that to say this, how we consume music is totally different. And like I said, it's not scarce anymore. So the reason why some of us rush to go listen to music, I don't have that rush anymore because I don't have to do it. The music isn't going anywhere. And to be honest, the music will come out on Fridays. And once the music comes out, it'll be the talk of your timeline through the weekend. But, who's to say that they're going to keep listening after the weekend? Who knows? Another thing is that has changed how we listen to music is how music is critiqued. With the advent of social media, everybody and their mama is now a music critic, or they're able to give their opinions on said music. And that's cool. But the thing about that is, and I always ask this question, do you want me to critique the music or do you want me to agree with you? Because you can't have both. Because if you ask me what I think about the music, I'm going to give you a fair and honest opinion. Doesn't necessarily mean that I'm going to agree with what you said or what you think of the music. If you ask me, hey, man, what do you think about this new album? Oh, it's okay. Oh, man, I think it's a classic. And then you're going to spend the next 15 minutes trying to convince me that it's a classic. Meanwhile, it's only been out for 8 hours. I'm not sure how it could be a classic in 8 hours, but hey, knock yourself out. My point in saying that is that I'm here for the critiques. I'm here to tell you what I think about the album if you ask. But I'm not here to agree or try to make myself agreeable to anybody who listens to this podcast or just gets my personal opinion on the music, because I'm always going to talk about the music. I'm always going to, like or dislike the music because I'm a music head. I'm a hip hop head. That's who I am. That's who I've always been. That's who I will always be. But the other side of it is that, no, I'm not here for the opinions. And another thing to add to that, personally, I don't care if you don't like the music that I like, because I like the music that I like. And your opinion doesn't matter. It's your opinion, but I never ask people about what they think about the music that I like. Why would I do that? That might be one of the dumbest things that you can do. It's my opinion. I'm not here to debate my opinion with nobody. That makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. But people get on the internet every day and do it. It's pointless to me, but hey, it is what it is. Some of you will listen to music and not be clear about what you've just heard. You will then turn to the internet to tell you whether or not it's good or not. That doesn't make any sense to me either. I know what I listen to, and if I like it, I like it. If I don't like it, it's cool. And I'm not here to tell you that you should be agreeable. I think that's foolish. If you like something, if you like something. You don't need, Joe Budden to tell you that it's good. You don't need the Source magazine to tell you that it's good. You don't need anybody to tell you that it's good. You know if it's good or not. So why do you waste your time asking people about what they think about what you've just heard? If you like it, that's all that matters. Listen, I have friends. Shout out to the homie Eclectic. I could call Eclectic right now. And if I say, hey, Eclectic, what do you think about A Tribe Called Quest's 4th album, Beats, Rhymes, Life? And he will tell you that album doesn't exist. I happen to love that album. I think it's a very, very solid album. But he doesn't think the album ever existed. He doesn't even acknowledge the album. So, but in saying that, that would be the gist of our conversation. I say, hey, I love this album. He said, I don't think that album ever happened to me. But it's not my job to convince him that the album was dope. And I think what we see is a lot of times, particularly on social media, people going above and beyond trying to prove how good something is. Listen, if you like it, cool. Don't get mad if somebody else doesn't like it. If it's something that I like, I have no problem with the fact that you may not like it. What I won't allow you to do is you tell me why I shouldn't like it or why I should like it. It ain't none of your fucking business what I like. In conclusion, listening to music is different. In this episode, I've laid out some factors why I think things have changed. And you can either adapt to those changes or you can keep it pushing. I think ultimately music and how we grow and how we've grown is different because we've gone through different segments of time. And I think in going through those segments, we've matured. Some of the music has gotten better. Some of the music has gotten worse. Some of the music has stayed the same. But it's ultimately about what you feel and what you think and how it hits you. Because music is something that's always going to be subjective. It's always going to be important to me. And that, my friends, is what it's all about. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We drop new episodes every Thursday. Also, we have merch. Click the link in the description box, and that way you can check out 12 Kyle podcast t-shirts, hoodies, as well as coffee mugs. We got it for the low. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. See ya.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.